Commercial radio and audio, where brands are heard.
I'm really not liking you right now.
No, I convinced her to do this. In fact, I made her do this.
I like being behind the scenes, as you know, and you said, I'm only doing it if you do it.
Yep.
And I was just backstage looking at you with not a really nice look on my face, and you said, babe, it's fine. It's just you and me. It's just you and me. And I said, I don't feel like you're being a supportive best friend right now. You're not really helping me. And I said,
just you and
it'll
me.
just be like me bringing a cockroach out for you.
Well, yeah, I do have a ridiculous fear of cockroaches, which is to the point where, as you know, Gemma, if a cockroach is in my home, I check out and go to a hotel. Like, I cannot deal with a cockroach.
Can't deal with it.
So I understand your fear, but thank you.
Okay. Thank you to Tia and Alex from SCA, by the way, who I just bumped into, my old stomping ground, who I just bumped into in the bathroom, who was so lovely about wanting to see you today. They said very nice things about you in the bathroom.
Oh,
all right.
thank you, guys.
In case you haven't already figured it out, guys, this is not going to be a professional conversation. As best friends, I think it's going to be quite loose.
It might go sideways a bit.
All right, so let's go. So last year was obviously a big year on so many fronts for you.
Yeah.
You and Kyle signed a history-making deal for 10 years for a total of 200 mil. Just a lazy 200 mil. You launched into Melbourne, obviously.
Yeah.
You launched a podcast, Her Best Life, which we have together. And you obviously released your book, The Whole Truth, which is now a bestseller. So what was last year like for you? Because there were so many highs and lows.
Yeah, there were actually. It was a big year when you put it like that. That's a lot in 1 year when you think about it. It was a year of me probably feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And I think had you kind of said, would I ever do a book? Would I ever, do half the things you mentioned on that list a few years back? The answer would have been no. I would have been probably a little fearful of doing something like that, like really putting myself out there. But, a lot has changed for me in the last couple of years. And so I really did decide to push myself, particularly with the book, I think. That was like a big deal for me just because of the content, obviously, that was included in that. And I always said that if I did a book, I wouldn't do it unless I absolutely told everything.
Yes.
I had to reveal it all and be in a place in my life where I felt comfortable doing that. And so I felt like that was that point. And then obviously going into Melbourne was such a big deal for us, signing the contract.
Yeah.
There were a lot of highs and lows in that year, but mostly I reflect on that year with a lot of highs. And I'm kind of proud of what I did, how I pushed myself.
Yeah. I think with the book, obviously, there was a bit of a bombshell in there with your addiction and rehab. And I knew that you wanted to tell that story, and I really commend you for that. And I think we certainly prepared, didn't we, for there to be a lot of backlash and judgment with that, which actually never came. But that break that you did on air, or that half an hour, let's call it, of radio that you did on air, I've never heard anyone be that vulnerable ever in radio. What was that moment like for you?
I remember obviously I started the book at the beginning of 2024. I forget what you were in half the time.
Yes.
You'd still think I have a problem. But in the beginning, it's 2025. So 2024, at the beginning, I started writing the book. I think we signed the deal at the end of 23. And when you sign a deal like that, then it's kind of like in your mind, okay, it's now locked in that you are going to share this information that people warn you may damage you. And I never thought it was going to destroy my career, but damage it. And so when that deal got done, in my head I was still like, yeah, but I can still pull out. I can still pull out. And then when we started writing the book, and as kind of the end of year approached, it started getting more and more real. And I really wanted to share that story in a book. That's the reason why I wrote the book, because I thought it was best to share it properly and give it context and really make people understand how it started, where it began, why I kept going, and the whole journey. So a book was going to be the best way to share that story, but I also didn't want to cheat my audience, because the audience they've essentially grown up with Kyle and I, a lot of them, and they feel like we're their family. And so I felt I couldn't just release a book, you know, and go, here, read it, you know, you'll see. Because that would have been really disrespectful to them, and they deserved more than that. So I knew that before releasing the book, I owed it to them to share that first on radio. How I shared it, obviously, I started by reading the first few pages of that book, and I knew in the lead up to it, I didn't want to pre-read that too much. I didn't want to do anything really to prepare for that moment. I just wanted to go into it, and whatever happened, happened, because I wanted that to be real. I didn't want it to feel rehearsed in any way. So it probably came across really raw because of that.
Yeah.
And as I was reading this, it was the prologue.
Yeah.
As I was reading it, you know, I had quite a few pages to get through before that line of, I checked myself into the Betty Ford Centre, and as I'm getting closer on air to this line, the feeling that I had was just, you know, like I've kept this secret for so many years, and now here I am, having never told hardly anyone, I'm about to share this publicly. And that feeling, that anxiety that builds as you know you're getting close to that line coming was just, you know, I can feel it in my body now.
Yeah,
I feel like
see.
crying now, right? Like, because it's taking me back.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, yeah, it was always going to be that way, that I would feel very exposed and vulnerable in that moment. So, yeah, but it also felt like a relief as well after. I was like, I did it, you know, I just did it.
Yeah.
I owned that, and I took a lot of the shame away, and I really think that's such a big thing, you know, for people who are in a position like mine to talk about those things, because it not only helps build a connection with your audience, but it really actually helps people feel less alone. And a lot of the time, I think I've been given this role, like where I have a platform to reach so many people. If I don't do something with that, I feel like I'm abusing that power.
Yeah.
So it was really important to me to be able to want to help other people. And I know that from sharing that story, I did, because of how many people contacted me through social media and other forms, and, you know, and how, yeah, I tried to kind of build a relationship with those people and help them. That's why I did it.
I think overall, though, the book got so much praise. You know, all the backlash that I had said to you might come, and we'd prepared for that, never really arrived. And in fact, you were really kind of overwhelmed by the positivity around the book. Why do you think that was? Why do you think it resonated so much?
I think people like to see that you know, your life isn't perfect, because nobody's life is perfect. And, you know, a lot of the time with social media, it makes it look that way. We only kind of share the good stuff, and that can be really depressing for a lot of us. And I think they like to see that you've got problems just like they do. You know, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Behind closed doors, you're just like me, and everyone knows that when you have a moment of someone you listen to or watch on TV, and then they say something that feels relatable to you, you feel closer to that person, more connected. And I just think people liked that rawness. It resonated, and a lot of people could relate to also marriage difficulties. You know, there's a lot about that in the book, and so many women go through that, especially, you know, in their 40s. Like, they start to go, wait, am I in the right relationship? And so it just, there was a lot of things that I think people could relate to, and not just women, it was men. I had so many men contact me saying, I've had this relationship too.
It was interesting, because I actually got lots of messages from people saying that they were surprised after they read the book, because they realised you weren't who they thought you were. They'd made an assumption that you were a certain type of person. In fact, I'm going to dob in Lizzie Young, who's the CEO of CRA, because she actually messaged me and said, I've just absolutely binged the book. And I have to admit, Jackie has so much more depth than I gave her credit for.
Yeah, well, thank you. I love hearing that. I think for so long there has been that perception that I haven't had much depth to me.
Oh, don't say that.
And I think, you know, but that's true in a way, because I think even I had that assumption at times. And the reason I had that assumption is because I was hiding so many parts of myself. And I think that it's impossible to have depth when you're hiding. You know, if you're not revealing your whole self, then yeah, you're showing a surface level. And I think when I started to kind of be okay with sharing a lot more about myself, then I became more confident in myself. And then I realized there was so much more to me, and I was not who I thought I was. It was almost like I had to grieve the person I thought I was my whole life. So, you know, I could go on about that. I'm not going to bore you guys because you guys want to get to the bar, I'm sure. But I'll just say that, yeah, I really kind of, a lot changed for me. And there is, you know, a lot more to me, I think, than people realized. And perhaps they got that from reading the book.
Now, you've signed for 10 years.
Yeah.
I just want to make it super clear you're aware that you're on air till you're 60.
Thank you, Gemma.
Yes. Just wanted to make sure. How are you going to have the stamina for that? Like,
oh, that I'm not worried about.
Does that worry you that you've got to keep getting up early for another 10 years?
No. The getting up early for me is like that. It's nothing. It doesn't bother me. I can go to bed at midnight and wake up at 4 and
I know, because
totally
we go on
fine.
girls' trips together.
Yes.
And we have to share a room sometimes, and you're terrible at being quiet in the morning.
I know. Even on weekends or holidays, I'm up really
You're up early.
It's just so ingrained now, that internal alarm clock. So I can have 4 hours sleep and be fine, 3 hours sleep. It doesn't matter. I just have a lot of energy, and the stamina is the last thing I'm worried about. Like that's the easy part.
Let's talk about Melbourne.
Melbourne. Go on. What do you want to ask?
I mean, a lot of people are saying that it's not going to work or that it's already failed. So let's just go for it.
Well, I love that people, whenever I get interviewed in the last 6 months, whenever I've been interviewed, you know, of all the things that people want to ask about, some of the things we've just touched on, the one thing they're most nervous to ask me is Melbourne. They always go, can we talk about Melbourne? And it's like, yes, why can't, okay, so Melbourne, we launched into Melbourne, obviously, and it didn't go gangbusters straight away. And I think people are nervous to ask about that because maybe they associate that with, you know, a loss of pride or something. I don't know. I'm not, you know, afraid to talk about that. I think in a weird way, Melbourne not being a success instantly is weirdly a good thing for us, because over the years, I mean, we've been doing breakfast for, you know, 20 odd years, more than 20 years. And there have been times where the show has inevitably kind of gone off track a little bit, because each day you kind of do things, you might push boundaries or test the limits, and before you know it, you're kind of over here when you should, the essence of what people love is here, and you've gone over here too much. And even before we launched into Melbourne, I think we went over there, right?
Yeah.
And so when we launched into Melbourne, we went in further over here.
Yeah.
And by it not being a success straight away, it humbled us, and it made us go, well, have we lost our way? It really made us reassess where we're at, what we're doing with the show, you know, do a reset. And so I think the show now that we're doing is it's sounding better than it has in a long time. I really think we've got our groove back, and I can feel it when we do. I know when we're on track and doing the things that make Kyle and I do great radio.
Yeah.
And as you know, that smut has really been taken away, and it's just good. The chemistry, that's where we excel, Kyle and I. We have really good chemistry, and when we talk and just talk, it's good. You know, it's entertaining. We don't need any of that other stuff. So Melbourne will be a slow, because they obviously tuned in instantly, got a lot of press, and so they tuned in and they heard really that we shouldn't have been talking about. And I cringe when I think, but anyway, it is what it is, it's done. And now we have to rely on those people to retune in and give it a second chance, and then I think that word of mouth is probably the way it's going to come around, but that will take time, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's totally fine. But in that, you know, being, I guess, when you're tested, you then get taught something from that. I think, and we did, and I see that as a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that you're thinking of it like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known you and Kyle personally now for 20-something years, and I know what your work ethic is, both of you, despite what appearances may seem. There is a very strong work ethic with both of you. And I know how competitive both of you are.
Yeah.
So do you have any specific plans around Melbourne? Look at me going all Ali Langdon on you.
I know, I'm impressed. Do we have specific plans? Well, actually, Kyle's gotten all wrapped up in buying a house in Melbourne and spending more time there. We both want to, actually, because we really want, I think it is, you know, Melbourne, like, to feel like they're just not some afterthought, you know, and rightly so. And I think us spending a lot more time there and leaning into that content that comes from Melbourne, like sharing that love more. But I think in terms of the content we're doing at the moment, the style and where it sits, I think we're in a good place. And I think it just now is kind of showing more love to Melbourne.
Don't change your AFL team though.
No, I'm still the Swans.
Great.
Still the Swans, yeah.
What do you think for advertisers and brands, what do you think they get with the Kyle and Jackie O show that they don't get anywhere else, or that they maybe don't even get on another medium?
Well, I think maybe the one thing that sets us apart probably is the talkability, for sure. I think, you know, we definitely have done content that gets talked about that day at work, and we integrate that with clients and have done in the past. Actually, a good example is the one we did recently. We did in Melbourne, the ball drop out of a helicopter. So our plan was we have 100 registered contestants on a tennis court, and then we have a big Kyle and Jackie O chopper flying overhead, and we drop 100 balls onto the court, and each one contains a prize, big prizes, and it was through Couture Jewelers. So they were sponsoring that whole event. And because of the idea, obviously we had people complaining, saying, what if the balls go into people's yards? What if it's a disaster? What if the wind blows and they go onto the road? Obviously we had done so many safety checks, we knew that wasn't going to happen. But we had news crews covering, we had Sunrise crossing every like 15 minutes, waiting for the stunt to happen, waiting for something to go wrong. And the client, like, they just got so much bang for their buck from that, because it did create that kind of publicity and visibility that they wouldn't necessarily have got somewhere else. Because I think, you know, it can be a curse and a blessing, but people wait for us to screw it up. And so that's the reason Sunrise was there. They weren't being, I'm sure they weren't being like, how cool is this? They were just waiting for something to go wrong. But that's the beauty, you know, and it really worked for the client. So it does, I think we have that talkability.
So it feels like interest in you is at an all-time high. It feels like you fart and it's in the Daily Mail. Like, that's what it feels like. I'm sorry, but it's like relentless every day.
Yeah.
What's going on? What's that about?
Well, you tell me. I have no idea. I don't know why I mean, I get like why they started. They were obsessed with the weight loss, and from there it just, you know, became, and it's flattering, don't get me wrong, I'm not like complaining or anything like that. It is flattering because when they write about you, you know, there must be some interest there. I don't understand it. As you know, after the book, I'm just laying low, like in my hermit mode at the moment, trying not to kind of go out or do anything for a while.
Because it feels like with everything that's gone on in the last few years, and particularly with what happened last year and your authenticity and, you know, being your best self and everything, it feels like you've really entered this era where like you've become this trusted voice for women, which is like, I would say probably something new for you in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
What do you think about that in terms of how that can be appealing, particularly for brands?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think trust is number one when it comes to your following, and for who advertisers decide to spend their money with, because women are smart and discerning, and they get thrown advertising at them everywhere they look. Every minute of the day, it feels like they're always being sold to. And I think, they're not necessarily just buying something from someone who they see as beautiful and popular. They need more than that. They need to feel like they're seen and heard and understood and represented in some way. And when you build that sort of connection through being seen, through you, with your audience, that is where the trust develops. It develops over time, obviously. I have that on my side. But I think when they can relate to you and they connect with you, then they're more inclined to listen to what it is and it works both ways, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not going to go out there and sell something and endorse something personally that I genuinely don't believe in as well. Like, I think you have to maintain that trust. You have to be authentic with what you're choosing to align yourself with. And I think, though, if you're an advertiser and you're aligning yourself with a brand that has an audience where it's predominantly women who do trust you, I think it goes beyond then the visibility, and it needs to go beyond visibility because, like I said, we're faced with choices everywhere. Visibility is one hurdle.
But it's not enough.
But it's not enough to sell the product really in, and I think that comes from that person who has that trusted audience, and they'll listen and believe what you're saying, and then that you're engaging a community who then talks to their friends, and I think that kind of is really valuable. And so I take that trust so seriously because you can lose it very quickly. And I think it's really important to be careful who you align yourself with in that respect.
Well, you've given me a perfect segue, and we are here talking about audio, so I have to use that word. But how do you then balance your personal brand and who you are now, which I would say has changed, as I just said, and Kyle?
Yeah, like we're two different people though.
Yes, I know that, but you need to explain that.
A lot of people don't know that. Because you're a duo on air, you often get kind of lumped in together as this one. And we are, there's in ways we're alike, but in ways we're polar opposites. And we are two very kind of different people. And the show is fun. Like when it's on track, the show is great, and I love being a part of that. But I also think, for me, the topics that interest me have changed over the years. And so whilst I still love doing the radio show, I love that silliness. And we do serious topics. We do touch on that. And I think, the podcast has been a great outlet for me to be able to talk about the things that I'm really passionate about that just wouldn't sit right on the Kyle and Jackie O show.
I was just going to say to you, then how does the podcast fit in, and why do the podcast?
Yeah, it was for that reason, I guess, we had so much we were listening ourselves to podcasts of a similar nature. It's a lifestyle podcast, so we cover relationships and a lot of psychology and
dating, sex,
parenting. Thank you. Yes.
Yep.
And I just love deep diving into those particular topics, and we have really similar interests in that respect. And we could talk for days about it, and a lot of it is really helpful to other women, and that is why we wanted to do it, because we're like, we need to let women know this stuff, so it was just a really good outlet for the stuff that I was really interested in talking about.
So what about advertisers then with podcasting? Like, how is it different for them with podcasting? What's the opportunity?
Well, yeah, it's different to radio. I mean, there's all ways you can obviously advertise on radio, whether it's live reads integrated or, your standard spots. Podcasting, obviously, we're not taking on that mass amount of advertising. And I think it's really great to kind of build that relationship with a client. Like Bumble was a great example of that. So we recently had Bumble work with us for 4 months sponsoring the podcast. And obviously we're single. It was perfect alignment. We really wanted to work with them on that.
We were on there a lot. Let's
We
be
were.
honest.
We genuinely were on there. And so it was a perfect fit. And so for them, they were able to really integrate their content into our podcast without compromising our content in any way. That was naturally stuff we wanted to do. And so we came to the table with ideas, and we wanted to go through what's right and wrong about our profile on Bumble. And so it was a great way to be able to tailor make content for them that really stood out. And I think that's the great thing about podcasting, is it can be a bit more bespoke and tailor made. And I think with podcasters, you know, once you've got that audience, they're quite loyal and locked on. They'll tune in every week. They know what day you're releasing your podcast. They can't wait for it. It's a kind of, you know, they set it in the calendar. And so once you've got that loyal audience, it's great for advertisers, because, you know, you're hearing it first thing. You got them. Yeah, it's I think a really great way for advertisers to spend.
I've got an analogy here, and I just want you to go with me on it, okay?
Okay.
So remember the other day I said to you there was a guy I saw at the beach, and I thought he was cute. And then I said to you, and he glanced at me, and I glanced at him, and then I glanced at him again, and I was just thinking, oh, please just come and ask for my number, which we've now learned guys never do. But
Oh, yeah.
I was like, why didn't he like just come and ask for my number? And what did you tell me?
Oh, about that. Yeah, okay. So I said to you, you've got to look at him 8 times. You've got to
8.
make eye contact 8 times. I've read this the other day, that unless you make eye contact with a guy in any situation, beach, bar, wherever it may be, they're not going to be confident enough to come over. And you're like, 8 times? And I'm like, yes, it needs to be 8 times. So I said to you, did you make eye contact 8 times? And you said, no, I made it twice.
Now, I feel like this is what it's like for brands. I honestly feel like
Yeah,
unless
you've
you
gotta
make
hit 'em over the
contact
head.
8 times,
Yeah.
they are not purchasing.
Yes,
Like that's
yes.
truly how I feel like it is nowadays.
Yeah, that's so true.
And I think also because with social, you've got 2 seconds to capture attention, whereas I think with audio, and you know, we're big lovers of the industry, is that it has that personal approach, but it's the frequency as well. And so you do literally get
Yes.
that 8
Yeah,
times.
that's
hitting over the
right.
head.
You're constantly hearing your favorite podcaster
Yeah.
say the same, like constantly
Over and
talk
over.
about this one brand, and
Yeah.
so it really like kind of penetrates.
Yeah. Now, we're in the last few questions now.
Okay.
And when you look at where you're at in your life now, and all that you've achieved, particularly in the last year, but really all that you've achieved in the last 20 years, and I know there's plenty more to come. When you think of like the little girl that you were on the Gold Coast, what do you think, like how do you feel when you think of like little Jackie and where you're at in your life now?
Oh God, I remember. I don't even know if I want to admit this. Actually, this is embarrassing. I remember being in my bedroom, and I used to. This is so lame. I used to pretend I was famous, and I would just imaginary sign. No, not even imaginary. I'd practice my autograph, give it out to everyone that was in my, like all the fans. Oh my God, that's so lame.
Well,
It sounds like
Big
all I
Billy-
want to do is be famous, which is the complete opposite. I'd say to her, it's not that great. That part is shit, let me tell you.
We're big believers in manifestation. You
Right, I
obviously started
manifested it.
really
I
young.
think I
Yeah.
manifested at 5, but I would say to her, geez, you're in for a ride, that's for sure. You know,
Yeah.
it's not going to be a boring life. It's
Yeah.
not going to be a boring life, and it's going to be full of great times, but also challenges. And I wouldn't warn her about any of the challenges either, because she needs to go through those
It's helped
to
you
come
grow.
out the other side. Yeah, you must. It's all about the growth. And,
Yeah.
and I, in a way, I appreciate every single one of them. There's nothing I would change, none of them. Some of them were really hard to get through, but I would never, ever erase that, because I just know what changed for me as a result of those moments. And so I know going forward in my life that if I'm hit with it again, which we all are going to be, you know, we're all going to be faced with the valleys. But when they happen, I hope I can appreciate that for what it is and know that I'm in pain right now and this is shit and it's challenging. But I also know that I'm going to come out the other side a better, stronger person who has grown. And so I hope that in the future I'll be able to appreciate those moments when they come.
That's very profound.
Oh, thanks.
Can we just finish going through a couple of things for 2025 and what it has in store for you in a few categories? So what has radio got in store for you in 2025, particularly because obviously Kyle's facing some health challenges at the moment, and obviously we want to support him through those, but what does radio have in store for 2025?
I think, you know, obviously Kyle's health is number one, and I think, you know, that we're okay with that at the moment. It's not, we're not making any, there's no operation coming up just yet, we're just monitoring it, so let's see what happens one day at a time with that. And I think for 2025, obviously, we really want to get stuck into Melbourne. And for us, we really want to lean into that and really want to focus on building that audience. So for radio, that will be our priority.
And what about Besties, our business? Because it's good for me to know what we're doing.
Well, Besties, yeah. So obviously the podcast we're loving and wanting to continue to do, we actually are probably going to do it twice a week now, as opposed to once a week. Yeah, I know, I roped you into it in the first place. But we are enjoying that, and we have online courses. We're really passionate about the online courses that we do, because the first one, the Red Flag Project, is all about, you know, the red flags to look out for in relationships and all of that. And then the second one we're about to launch is a negotiation course for women, which Gemma is so great at. And this is a course that you have been working on for the last 6 months. And I think it's wonderful that women will have access to that, because that's one thing that, you know, we should be good at, but sometimes we don't believe in ourselves enough. And I know I've been guilty of that. So many women I know in the workforce have struggled with going in and advocating for themselves. And so this course is all about that. And then we have events. It's busy. We've got a lot going on.
What about personally?
Personally, I'm making the most of spending every minute I can with my daughter before she wants to just, you know, flick me. She's still happy to spend time with me, so I'm really kind of making the most of that. It would be nice if I could get a boyfriend. Any takers? I really apparently suck in that department. Why? Well, you know, you can't have it all, hey? You really can't have it all. The career's good, but the boyfriend front, not so much.
And you are the queen of woo-woo, as I call you.
Woo-woo, I love the woo-woo stuff.
In fact, our episode this week for the podcast was all about the woo-woo things we've tried.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything left that you haven't tried, but do you have any woo-woo things for 2025?
Well, you bought me one for my birthday. She's sending me off on a silent retreat. I can't talk for the whole time I'm there. I just have to be silent.
It was payback for making me do this.
That's my next woo-woo thing. I think that's going to be great. Like, no phone, no music, nothing, just me and my thoughts.
We recognise it's between us and having drinks, so I think we will finish it there. Thanks for letting us join you, and please thank my beautiful guest, Jackie O.
Thank you.
Commercial radio and audio, where brands are heard.